If you're new here, I'm Angela. This is my husband, Vince. We travel full-time in an RV with our 2 rescue dogs. This one right here is Gracie, and she's going to not want to say hi right now. And then Loki is never to be seen by anybody because he hates people. So today we wanted to sit down and talk about our time in New Mexico and kind of New Mexico's atomic history and what we did out there to see some of that. So
it was really amazing. We were staying in Albuquerque, and I guess that's where we started at the National Museum of Atomic History, I believe is the actual title for it, which was amazing. It went from Einstein's letter, which started the Manhattan Project, when he wrote to President Roosevelt and said that the Germans were pursuing atomic bombs, and that it would be in our best interest to beat them with that. All the way through the Trinity test, to the Cold War, up to modern times, even talking about atomic tourism. People would go to Las Vegas and watch the mushroom clouds far out in the desert, because something that big obviously could be seen for many miles.
Mm-hmm. So the museum had a lot of artifacts. A small video to watch too, but mostly just artifacts and like everything you can imagine and couldn't imagine that had to do with the creation of the atomic bomb. So it was interesting to walk through, and kind of a great history as a way to kind of get you up to speed on your history if you've forgotten some of it, and then take you to the rest.
From a replica of the gadget to the car that drove the plutonium core out to the test site, the National Museum of Nuclear Science and History is a very well done museum dedicated to telling the story of our atomic past. In the 1950s, at the start of the Cold War, school children would practice duck and cover drills in the event of a nuclear war. The Titan rocket family was the early workhorse of our ICBM arsenal. This exhibit explains the nuclear triad of our national defense. Here are some examples of how the nuclear age permeated into our everyday lives, including a model of one of only 4 nuclear-powered cargo ships. President Eisenhower envisioned the Savannah to be an ambassador to the peaceful use of atomic energy. She was in service from 1962 to 1972. Growing up in the 50s and 60s had a lot of nuclear-based toys and entertainment choices for kids. Remembers this nuclear-powered mode of transportation. Speaking of transportation, the museum has a large exhibit displaying the safety and containment efforts used to transport nuclear waste. According to this marquee, over 16 million miles were driven safely. PNM provides power to more than 530,000 customers. 35% of this comes from mission-free nuclear power. Their goal is to be 100% emission-free by the year 2040. Right now, the power is generated from a mix of 27% coal, 35% nuclear, 14% natural gas, and 24% from solar, wind, and geothermal sources. In 1977, President Jimmy Carter imposed a ban on the recycling of spent nuclear fuel to stop the proliferation of nuclear weapons. Nuclear energy is also used for medical research and medical reasons. A display explains Germany's work with atomic energy and how it ties into our own nuclear program. If you had red or deep orange Fiesta ware prior to 1972, it had uranium in it. They say it was harmless, but I would get rid of it anyway. The museum's 9-acre park has many examples of our nuclear triad and the means of employing nuclear weapons. This replica of the tower at the Trinity Site shows how the bomb was suspended from it. The actual bomb was suspended 100 feet in the air.
So next up, we went up to Los Alamos. That's about an hour and a half outside of Albuquerque. So depending on which way you take, we took the mountainous route the first time so that I could show off the mountains because, as we all know, I love New Mexico. And working on getting him and falling more and more in love with New Mexico so we can spend more time there. But we took the mountain way the first time and came in through one of the old gates, and the building's still there. A lot of what's in Los Alamos is off limits now, but some of the things like the gate buildings you can still see. There's a replica of another gate building, but the tower is still there. There's just all of the Oppenheimer's house is still there. You can look in the windows of it.
Yeah, Hans Bette's house is there. It is Hans Bette's house is there. It is set up as it has many exhibits in there. It has Nobel Prizes from many Nobel laureates from atomic energy. It's with the exhibits, it's still also set up kind of how it would have been in the 40s when he was staying there during the Manhattan Project. It has some older buildings. The women's civilian barracks is still up. The old dining facility is now the local theater. But as you can imagine, a lot of the buildings that were set up very hastily during World War II are no longer there. I mean, they've been replaced with, brick and concrete and all that. But the history is amazing. There's also and
then some of the buildings that they actually did the work in open up once a year, I believe it is, but we didn't hit that. And you have to take a guided tour in, and it's a lottery system to get into those buildings and everything too. So they're basically off limits because they're still doing so much research out at the Los Alamos labs that they have to have those areas restricted. And I think that Los Alamos, too, it was interesting how simple these scientists live when they were creating something that they had no idea what was going to happen when they created it. And they were creating something so highly advanced and living very, very simple lives out there. That was part of the draw for Los Alamos for them, was to go out where nobody cared what they were doing and live a simple life while they could focus on the science. And so the Los Alamos Day was really about the science of it all. The artifacts are in Albuquerque. Los Alamos is about the science behind it and really helps you dive more in that museum to the science and just who these people were and everything that way.
The Los Alamos Ranch School was purchased by the government to use to build the bomb, and Fuller Lodge was the school's dining hall, but Manhattan Project scientists used it primarily as a community center. The lodge was the center of life at Los Alamos. It served as a dining hall, town hall meeting place, a place for parties and dancing. They even played basketball in there. Also in Los Alamos is the Bradbury Science Museum, which has a lot of the same exhibits as you would see at the Albuquerque one. It's just on a little smaller scale. But it also has some of the cameras that were actually used to record the atomic tests, which I thought was very interesting.
Yes.
The Bradbury even has an analog calculator used during the development of the bomb. This fire set was a component of the Fat Man atomic bomb that supplied energy to the bomb's detonators. The detonators compressed a mass of plutonium-239, which triggered a nuclear chain reaction and explosion. Ashley Pond was named after the school's founder, Ashley Pond Jr., and it's where Los Alamos residents could relax while contemplating the magnitude of their work. You took me to the Lamy train station.
Oh, yep.
Which is where the scientists back on the Manhattan Project.
So Lamy is just outside of just outside of Santa Fe. I used to live in a neighborhood near there, and it's probably 20 minutes outside of Santa Fe, and it's the Amtrak station that still comes through, and it's just an old train station. I don't think they've really updated it in whenever they put that train station first through. It's still the old stone benches. I'm sorry, Bubba. Did Mama hit you? Still the old stone benches that sit there, and just very old. But that's where the scientists came in when they came into Los Alamos. They had
Obviously
to come into,
under a veil of secrecy.
Yeah, they had to come into Lamy first and then make their way into Santa Fe, where they met their contact there to then get out to Los Alamos.
And they went into this tiny little, what would you call it, like a courtyard?
Yeah.
To this very nondescript window at the back of it. And I'm sure they had some sort of like code word or something, but that's where they met their contact and then were taken actually on to Los Alamos.
If you're familiar with Santa Fe at all, it's where a store called the Rainbow Man, it's been there forever, is located now, and you just walk back into that courtyard. And there's a small little plaque there that mentions the Manhattan Project and that it's, and how it was related to the area. And that's pretty much all you'll get out of Santa Fe. But we did go there, and then we headed out to the Trinity Site. The Trinity Site is open now, I believe, once a year. It used to be twice a year. So now they're going to one day a year due to budgeting concerns. And that's going to be every October, it sounds like. And you will trek out into the middle of nowhere with a 5.5 mile long line of cars waiting to get in.
And that is not an exaggeration.
No,
that is a 5.5 mile long line of cars.
And you are going onto a military base, so you will be, you have the option, or they have the option of searching you. You will have to show ID and that sort of thing. And then you'll basically be taken in, shuttled in, through guards sitting at every other road that you could take into one area that's the little parking lot there by where it was ground zero, basically.
Yeah. And it is out in the middle of nowhere that the government got because of the isolation, a supply of water, and there was really nobody there. I mean,
Beautiful, beautiful scenery all around you, though. It really is, because, I mean, the New Mexico mountains are always beautiful. Just in case I needed to get that in there one more time. But it's just a beautiful area out there. It was a kind of a foggy morning that turned into a sunlight, and then later rain for us while we were there. So the weather was kind of ominous. And then once you're there, you'll get on a bus if you want to go see the ranch house. And you'd be bussed over to the ranch house, which you just walk through, you know, and question your sanity at the point that you're like, this is the plutonium room.
It is where they assembled the plutonium core for Fat Man.
In the house.
In the house.
In the room that you walk through.
In literally the master bedroom of the McDonald Ranch House. Then you take the bus back, and then we walked out to the actual ground zero where they have a stone pillar, which was directly placed where it would have been directly under the gadget, which, as you all know, was the first atomic detonation. It was actually suspended 100 feet in the air. And this is all in a depression created from the explosion. So.
And there's still, the glass that was made is still scattered all about. You're not supposed to take it. We did not.
It is actually a federal offense.
Yeah, we did not take any, but I did pick it up and look at it and again question my life choices that I'm holding glass that was made from a nuclear bomb. But we looked at it, we left it. There unfortunately were people taking it. But it was really nice. They had a lot of historian experts out there for you to speak with. And we did get to speak with one, and we're going to put that in right here.
Well, it's a mix. I mean, the people that come here are preloaded with all kinds of ideas and stuff. I think most of them, as a rule, understand the importance of it. I mean, that explains why they're here in the middle of nowhere on a lousy day and the weather's awful. So that says something about it, that they understand that. The science and technology and stuff, maybe not so much, but the questions are getting better. I mean, when I started doing this since 1977, most of the questions were, why is it called Trinity Site, stuff like that. Now I'm getting more questions about the technology. How was the explosion supposed to go off? How do you get that critical mass? Some of those kinds of things, which is kind of nice.
Yeah. And how high was it suspended off the ground?
It's 100 feet off the ground.
100 feet off the ground.
And they did that for several reasons. One is that it gives everybody and all the equipment, the cameras and everything, a clear view from great distances. If you'd put it on the ground, the undulations in the ground and stuff would have been a problem for seeing it when it first starts to explode. Also, putting it at 100 feet above the ground cuts down tremendously on how much earth is going to be sucked up into the fireball and become radioactive fallout. Putting it up there reduced that tremendously. The same idea at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the bombs exploded a couple thousand feet up. Very little fallout from those bombs. Well, I've been doing this since 1977. I've got a few pat things that I say, and one of them is that historically and philosophically, I guess, this is a clear demonstration of what human beings can do when they work together. They've got a common goal. You know, it's like Space Shuttle or Apollo and things like that. Everybody's doing their part and they can do things quickly. And it's a group effort. Very clever people, etc. Now the question is, we need clever people to deal with the consequences of this development.
I heard you talking about jumbo with the people in front of us. Can you give an explanation of what jumbo was and what it was meant to be for? I know it wasn't used.
Jumbo the idea is based on the design of the bomb. The plutonium bomb tested here relies on a core of plutonium about the size of a youth softball, 13.5 pounds. And so it's pretty small, but you've got to turn that into a critical mass. And to do that, they came up with surrounding it with 5,000 pounds of high explosives. And those were in 32 separate lenses or pieces of high explosives. The idea is to get all 32 to explode simultaneously and compress that ball down to the size of something like a golf ball to get a critical mass, the atoms all close enough together that you can get a chain reaction going and get the kaboom, a fast chain reaction. Didn't know if that was going to work. In those days you had mechanical switches and all the rest of it. So the idea was to go ahead and test the bomb inside of jumbo, and that way if it was a fizzle, if they didn't get that simultaneous explosion and just got the explosion and not a nuclear explosion, jumbo would keep the plutonium intact inside jumbo and keep it from blowing out all over the countryside. But it was a horrible idea. Scientists didn't like it. It would interfere with doing most of the measurements and stuff. Plus you'd have to assemble the bomb from scratch almost inside jumbo, which would be an awful thing to do. So they all lobbied against it, and they soon abandoned plans to use it. And it stood out here 800 yards from ground zero on its end in a concrete pad.
Do you have any?
I should probably explain that now what you see in the parking lot here, what's left of jumbo is just the inner shell, the 6-inch thick shell. That was covered with 9 more inches of banding, steel bands around it. So that survived the explosion, the nuclear explosion on July 16th very well. However, in the next year, 1946, the people up in Albuquerque, Sandia Labs, brought down 8 500-pound bombs, placed those inside jumbo, and exploded it while it was standing on end. That explosion, because it was asymmetrical, the bombs were in the bottom of jumbo, blew off both ends of jumbo. And so then it tipped over and laid there in the arroyo, well, part of an arroyo, for years, and the bands were taken off of it. And eventually the missile range got asked about it all the time. Visitors would come to open houses, can we see jumbo? Well, it's 800 yards over here. And so the missile range made arrangements to move it over here. And in 1979, I think, we put it here so that people can see it, what's left of it. So the original is 214 tons. This is a mere fraction of that. The 9 inches of banding, the rounded ends, this is probably only 30 or 40 tons. Still pretty good weight.
So we were talking, was it always a closed site?
Yes,
Okay.
It's always been a closed site. This outer fence has been here since the 40s.
Okay.
And to keep the site off limits, because it is a radioactive site, and by regulation it has to be marked with warning labels and stuff, and admittance has to be controlled, that kind of a thing. But the site was first open to the public in the early 1950s when the religious groups in Alamogordo requested permissions to come out and do a service for peace at the site. And that has evolved over the years to just an open house, and since the early 1980s has grown to the point where we now have thousands of people showing up for these open houses as opposed to 500 or 600. When I first did it in 77, I think we had 800 people here. I bet we've got thousands today.
Yeah, I saw in a newspaper article that they had 4,000 last year.
Yeah, it's probably going to be that again this year.
All right, well, thank you so much.
Okay.
The only really thing left at ground zero from the explosion is part of the footing of one of the four that were holding up the tower. Surprisingly, I don't understand how that managed to be there, but there is still remnants of one of the footings.
Weird things happen.
Yeah. So, like I think you said it the other day, when you were at the Trinity Site, you really felt the weight
Yes.
of what happened.
You
at
felt
that site.
the quote of Oppenheimer, "I've become the destroyer of words." Before at the Albuquerque Museum in Los Alamos, you kind of feel that, I guess the word would be excitement of the science. You know, the awe. I think awe is probably a better word. The awe of the science that came together to do this. That, you know, quite honestly, we don't take time to recognize the awe of science anymore. You know, that we used to be excited about every space shuttle launch and that sort of thing. And we don't really take the time to go, wow, this is an incredible accomplishment anymore. But you recognize that during those museums and just the trip around Los Alamos. But then you get there and you see the beauty of the land around it and the depression in the earth and the glass everywhere. And it kind of hits you what that really was. And, you know, there's a heavy weight that comes with that realization. So,
but hopefully you enjoy this video and learn a little bit more about the atomic history of, well, just atomic power, atomic weapons, but also of New Mexico, Albuquerque, Santa Fe, Los Alamos, and all that.
And take away how beautiful New Mexico is.
I will say the food's fantastic. I can't get enough.
And it's beautiful. And it's beautiful.